Hey, what's going on, guys? Nova here, and guess who's back again for another YouTube video. Finally got my hair done. It's looking nice, it's looking spiffy, and we're back on NeoNetwork. Now, in case you guys do not know, Season 4 is here. Neo actually just posted a bunch of big new changes that he's having on the server for Season 4, and they're insane, I'll be honest with you. According to him, over 75% of them were based on the suggestions in the suggestion tab, and I can confirm this. A lot of these changes are things that a lot of people have wanted for so long, and stuff that even I have said this needs to happen, and I'm so excited to see that they're finally putting these things in the game, and I'm just excited for the future overall. So basically what I'm just going to do in this video is I'm going to go by line all the changes that were made on the server, just basically so that you don't have to. Now, in case you've been living under a rock for the past week, since Neo has consistently spoiled and informed us about this, fishing is the first major thing that's being added to the server. Obviously it's not in the game yet, and therefore you're just going to see me getting a raw cod. But basically what's happening is they're adding a bunch of new things such as custom fish, custom reward, fishing rod skins, fishing masteries, custom items and baits for fishing, lava fishing, a new aquatic deboss for fishing, and fishing net island upgrades. Now, we don't have much info on what this is overall, but basically we have a lot of spoilers and hints that they've posted previously. And I am going to actually make a dedicated video on the specifics of fishing, how they function, and basically how you can get a leg up by abusing what we know so far about fishing. Next important thing is going to be the changes to all of the island top leaderboards. Now, first of all, before anything, they're actually adding a solo leaderboard. So naturally, as you see here, these are all the top actual islands, and if I do /is top, you can see that they're the same people, and it's just a bunch of teams. Basically, what they're going to do next season is, along with having all the team islands, they'll also have a second kind of solo islands for individuals who don't have a team already. This is going to be very similar to the normal island top, but instead it's going to have a much reduced payout, as well as basically be only for those who are playing solo and want to progress solo. Beyond this, the important thing for the teams is actually they're increasing the payout that players are going to get for being part of these teams and making it weekly instead of bi-weekly. So currently, as you see, the payouts is going to be $50, $30, $20, $15, and $10 to the top 5 members. Now with the new system, it's actually going to be $75, $50, $35, $25, and $15. Now that is one thing, but the other big thing is that instead of bi-weekly, they're actually making it weekly. So these players are not only getting much more money payout, but they're actually getting this payout twice as often. Now I kind of have a problem with this because it kind of walls the gap between the weak and the strong, mainly because these top players are getting so much money that they can spend on servants and skins and other type of random bonuses that the players that aren't actually in the top 10 are going to really struggle to catch up with these players. The important thing though is that there is actually a lot of grinding required when playing on the server, making sure that your servant's high level, claiming all the servants, and so on and so forth, that I actually don't think it'll have too much of an impact, and those who are a bit further behind may be able to catch up. But this is just something we'll see when the server gets released. The important thing to consider though is going to be with the solo leaderboards. Now, these solo leaderboards are going to function a lot different conceptually to the team leaderboards for a lot of different reasons. This is something I'm also going to get into a next video because there is just a lot that you have to consider when you think about how solo leaderboards would function. The one thing we do know is that the solo leaderboards are also going to have a payout on a weekly basis, but for significantly less than the teams are going to get. Solos are going to get $30, $20, $15, $10, and $5 for placing a top 5, and this will go specifically to that one player rather than an entire team. So in theory, you're getting more money per person, but you're still getting less money for your team overall. Brand new personal missions are added along with the 5 that we already have. Now, I haven't really progressed too far in my missions just because I kind of had other things to do, but now there's going to be 10 tiers and they're going to have increase in better rewards, so maybe it might be worth my time. Likewise, there'll also be new cosmetic tags you'll get through these that I assume will carry on through each season, so it'll just kind of show you that you progress in previous seasons. A new competitive leaderboard system is also being added to the server that will basically track all the different grinded methods. The tracking will reset daily, weekly, monthly, and have an all-time system to show all of these different levels of how people are progressing. An easy thing to compare it to would kind of be to /MC top, where basically you can see how much people are playing based on the different things that they're doing. Similarly, if I was to do /MC top mining, for instance, you could see basically how much people have mined. The significant difference for this is that we'll actually have different systems for daily, weekly, and monthly. Basically, so it's not just like the same players all the time, but instead you can actually see how much players have been playing on that specific day, that specific week, or of course that specific month. Also, since it's now specific to grinding methods, it will not only show stuff like mining swords, it will actually show mobs killed, blocks broken, random stuff like this. I also believe they're going to have stuff like deboss damage done, so that is definitely something that we're going to have to look into. Grind Pass has now been updated to now give better rewards and also to progress not only with kills, but also with other forms of grinded methods. So basically, instead of only being able to progress the Grind Pass if you're killing Vexes or grinding in other sorts of ways, now you can actually progress by breaking blocks and by farming crops, something that we've requested since its iteration. A new daily login with daily rewards is now being added that will basically run alongside with the already existing daily spinners, missions, and other forms of daily content that we have to get rewards. Apparently, it would scale with having better rewards each month, basically making it so if you join later in the season, you aren't really having a deficit by not having as many spinners accumulated as before. Now, while I do like this because it's adding more things that more casual players can have to kind of compete with competitive players, I don't like it because there is now so many more different systems of getting daily rewards. We have vote-in, vote parties, the lucky blocks, grind pass, the new daily login, daily spinner, and I'm beginning to think we're having too much where it's actually going to be a bit overwhelming to keep track of all the different rewards we can get. What would be nice if we have a GUI to kind of keep track of everything so we can know what we already did, what we need to do, so on and so forth. We will also have brand new island upgrades that not only supply us with lightless crops, but waterless sugarcane. Now this is massive because, not going to lie, there's nothing I hate more than having to place all of these light sources to make sure all my crops grow. It's just a very annoying and a pain, and it's even worse when you realize that one part isn't actually lighted up and it just doesn't grow or it breaks, and it's just annoying. So this is a very big thing that's going to be very, very important for progression on the server. Likewise, waterless sugarcane is also really, really big and maybe meta defining, but we're not sure yet. At the end of the day, carrots and potatoes are likely going to be worth a lot more than sugarcane regardless, but it is still something we're going to have to consider and definitely going to be a buff for sugarcane. Now we can get into more general changes. The Nether has officially been removed, something that I don't really mind too much. It wasn't something I unlocked or something I was really interested in anyway, just because it really seemed like a boring concept to me personally. Once again, I always said I love the old Nether a lot more and I really wish they'd bring it back, but basically they're removing it now so they can consider to rework it and make it better, likely something we'll see in Season 5 or so on. A brand new /bounty plugin has been added, basically allowing players to put a bounty on other players so that when they're killing the war zone, it gives money. Now, I don't like this bounty system. I've never liked a bounty system. I think it's a really boring system because, long story short, what's going to happen is there are going to be certain players like Leo and mods and different devs who are going to have really, really high bounties, but they'll never actually lose it because they'll never go into the war zone. Likewise, there are going to be players who go into the war zone very often who, even though they consistently have bounties, just because they're having fun and they often die sometimes, they won't actually accumulate that much. The only thing that will happen is every once in a while, one of these high players with like really high bounties like Neo will basically say, hey, drop it in the war zone with a $1 trillion bounty, come catch me, and that will pretty much be the end of that. Ancient Debris has finally been added to the Molten Enchant list, meaning that you'll no longer have these giant chests filled with ancient debris, but instead have them turned directly into scrap. Now, I'm not sure exactly how much this will interact with Fortune, Condenser, and Treasury, but this is something we'll have to see and will probably turn out to be a buff for netherite production overall. Next is an interesting thing with multi-kill and silk touch being added to axes. Now, personally, I'm not sure if this will have any impact on the server whatsoever. I mean, for multi-kill, you'll always rather use your Slayer Blade just because you'd rather have the loot in 25 than the max loot in 3 on an axe. And for silk touch, I guess it's convenient if you want to farm melons without them turning into melon slices, but overall I don't think it's going to make that much of an impact on the server overall. If anything, it's nice you want to grind some MCMO axes levels while also getting mastery and killing more mobs, but I really wouldn't waste a multi-kill book on an axe specifically for that. Now, the next change is a massive change, and it's actually the ability to get skin crate keys from cosmetic crates. Now, if you've been playing for a while like me, you likely have a bunch of random cosmetic like stuff that you can't really use just because you already have them unlocked, and therefore cosmetic crate keys just kind of felt useless to you. Now they aren't useless and you can actually use them in order to try and get more skin crate keys. Now I'm curious what the rarity on these are going to be, but regardless they are definitely going to be worth some amount of money because players will now buy them with the slight potential chance of getting skin crate keys. An amazing change that I'm really excited to see. Now going back over to the Ancient Debris side of things, Ancient Debris will now actually have an enchant that allows you to insta-break them, something that people have been asking for so long. Now naturally this is going to be very useful just for overall mining because now there won't be situations where there's sometimes that the netherite doesn't actually get broken like there, and you have to go out of your way to make sure that you actually break it, basically wasting your super breaker and overall lowering your general netherite production. Now this will be very good because now the netherite will break instantly, meaning that you're not only getting more netherite every time you super break, but you're generally going to be getting netherite faster overall. Now another important thing is going to be with my tall generator, or as someone dubbed it, the gravity generator, which basically allow you to AFK mine by just looking downwards without having super breaker. The big issue with it is if you ever were to hit into netherite, you'd actually break the netherite so slowly that you wouldn't actually be able to continue going before the block gets built. Now with this new enchant, it basically makes it so you're going to insta-break the netherite and you can actually consistently go down overall. But where this will truly shine will be with my chunk generator, the giant 9x9 generator that basically allows you to mine straight down and make the best use of the explosive armor possible. The big disadvantage of it was the fact that netherite actually prevented you from going all the way down, and now with this new change you'll actually be able to use this efficiently and make the best use of explosive armor physically possible. This will likely mean I'll have to make a video on it explaining how it's built and how it's worked, but we'll see about that in the future. The next change is that auto sell is now going to be a toggleable thing on the super pickaxe. An interesting change that basically makes it so you don't have to worry about making a giant collection system for all of your ores, therefore being able to sell them instantly without having to use this. While this seems good conceptually, I actually don't think it's that good and really wouldn't recommend against ever using this ever. That's because truly there never isn't a way you should go out of your way to immediately sell these blocks. The thing is, as the season goes by, there's a lot of players that actually want to buy these blocks for the sake of value, and there's never going to be a situation in the server where you'll actually be able to sell the blocks for more than other players would buy them for. For instance, if I was supposed to sell a stack of block of diamonds, it'll actually sell for 100,000. But as you see, players like Stoller or other high islands that are going to be there next season will actually buy them for significantly more. So if I was to go ahead and sell, I would actually sell the entire attack for 777,000 for the whole thing. This is a very important thing to consider when you are actually mining these blocks, because there's often not a time where you'll actually want to auto sell the stuff. This is also important to consider because a lot of these stuff are also used for stuff in the mastery tab, such as creating XP farms or a bunch of other random stuff like hoppers. For that reason, I'd stray away from ever using this feature, but it is really nice that they're basically balancing the stakes with the Slayer Blade and the Farmer's Harvester, making that each of them can actually toggle their auto sell. The next change will actually be with the settings tab, basically increasing the amount of settings that you can actually toggle. Now in case you don't know the settings tab exists, it basically is a tab where you can toggle stuff like feed drops on and off, as well as different stuff like vote messages. Now they're adding a bunch of different toggles, including the MCMMO replant sound toggle, a vote rank showing off toggle, a global booster toggle, the messages from the XP farm being toggled, and the competition pop-up toggle. Now definitely being able to toggle the MCMMO replants is going to be very beneficial, just so you don't have that sound being blared in your ears. I don't see why I'd ever want to disable seeing the vote rank, but maybe for this is people where the vote rank doesn't really match up well with the theme that they're going for in chat. And the XP farm being disabled is kind of nice because you're already getting the XP regardless, you don't want to get reminded when you're getting the XP. Global booster and competition toggle though, I'm not quite sure why I'd ever toggle these off because it's important to know them, except maybe very late in the game where competitions aren't really worth as much, but I still wouldn't see why you'd want to toggle these off. Next is a massive change that everyone's going to love, and it's actually for the ability for co-owners to be able to claim your island missions. Now previously, obviously it was really annoying because only the owner could claim the island missions, so therefore if your owner wasn't online or if they often didn't check the island missions, you weren't actually getting the bonus or the benefit from actually completing these missions. Now co-owners can claim them, which is a very big benefit for those that play on bigger islands. Not really much that matters to the solos, but definitely those that play in like the 10-man islands and the IS top islands that are going to really be happy that this change was added. Next is the ability to actually set your ore generation level, a very helpful change that will be super useful for people who really need cobblestone to maybe make some furnaces. Now, the one thing that we should keep in mind is actually the fact that most people won't really use this too often, specifically because molten is now added to ancient debris. The biggest reason for lowering your ore gen would be to get cobblestone, which is useful for making furnaces, but the biggest use for furnaces was making sure you had a furnace set up to make your ancient debris into actual netherite blocks. Previously, some people would forget to make the furnaces, and therefore they'd actually have to go out of their way to buy cobblestone or just buy super furnaces on the AH. Now with this new change, that isn't the case, and now you can actually revert your ore gen to level 1, specifically so that you can get this cobblestone for this purpose. Now it's useful, but I don't actually think most people are going to use it, specifically because now that molten actually affects ancient debris, most people won't really need a big furnace setup except maybe for island missions and personal missions. For the most part, my recommendation is to actually turn all of your cobblestone into furnaces from the get-go, just because selling cobblestone isn't worth that much anyway, and this way you won't have to waste time actually reverting your ore gen. But in cases where you mess up and you really do need to go back, it's a very useful change that I'm happy was added. The next one is interesting because it actually says that a new command has been added known as /mob drops that will actually show you the mob drops and how often you get them. This is interesting because this is actually a command that's already in the game. You can actually already do /mob drops and see like the percent that you can get different drops, but there was never actually an official announcement that this was added, and was actually added mid-season by request. So basically it's making up for that, making it that it is in fact a command that is in the game. The ability to change your island chat color has actually recently been added, basically making it so you don't actually have the standard white anymore, and it's a bit easier for you to see the messages that your island chat's saying to you. Regardless, most people are probably going to use Discord for the communications, and this will only be used for people who are like just partnered random people on Minecraft. So it's a useful change, but I don't think it's going to do much. The next change though is really useful, allowing you to use the item command in the island chat. Previously, if I was to use the item command, this is how it would show up, but now you'll actually be able to item your items in your island chat, therefore you won't have to put those items in public and worry about other people being like, whoa, what's this doing here? It's a fun quality of life change, and it beats being able to screenshot yourself and put it in Discord anyway, so why not? A new mastery crafting table has been added, basically allowing you to place the item and access the mastery crafting table. It's a nice quality of life change, but in case you didn't know, you can actually do /mcraft in order to open the crafting table without having to go out of your way to go through the whole mastery list. Basically, consider how often you use a crafting table compared to /craft, and that's how often you'll use the mastery table compared to /mcraft. There's a high likelihood that some people actually don't have access to this command. I'm not sure if that's the case, but if it is the case, then there you go, now it exists. A new ability has been added to reroll your daily mission, a really useful thing in case there's a mission you don't want to do, like maybe the bar mini games, or in case there's a mission that's actually bugged and you don't want to be cheated out of a quest pouch, stuff that I'm pretty sure we've all had happen to us before. All rank kits are also now being changed to netherite, basically meaning you don't have to have a smithing table specifically to change all of your kits to netherite just for an extra 15,000 gold. Saplings and sticks are now being added to log hoppers, making it very convenient for actually having a wood farm set up. Though wood bastards has always been pretty bad, so I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where it's very often used. A new island permission is going to be added, allowing you to make visitors and other players able and not able to till land, basically allowing you to invite people to your island to till like giant plots of land for you, so you can effectively pay them without having to make them a member or trust in them. Overall, that's going to be the end of the general changes, and now we're going to get into more of the economy changes on the server. First of all, before anything is considered, the entire economy is being reduced by 50%. This means both the buy and sell value of every single item in the game. So basically, if we look at netherites and see that we will buy for 27,000 and sell for whatever number that is, instead it'll be cut in half. So now you'll only buy for about 13,500 and sell for half whatever number that is. Obviously, this will also interact with stuff like Vex spawners and Vex drops, but really this won't really have much of an impact on the server overall. Pretty much all this will do is make stuff like the battle top more digestible to look at, and make all the numbers basically half of whatever they are right now. Likewise, any item that is worth a certain amount of money, like let's say sky coins, will actually be worth half as much instead. So if sky coins previously were worth 1 to 20, now they'll be worth 1 to 10, just because there's less money going in and out the entire system. Once again, this won't actually truly affect anything, but it's just for a visual perspective of how things work out. What will be changed though is Cactus actually getting their price reduced for like the 3rd season. Now, I don't know how much this nerf is going to go down by, but I really don't think this will have that much of an impact. The primary benefit of Cactus is just to be a facilitator to making money, and isn't something to be relied on, especially in the late game. That's because no matter how much money you're actually getting from Cactus, it doesn't hold a candlestick to stuff like Servants and Vexes. Regardless, what this is going to do is slow down the early game progression of making money, which isn't really the name of the game. At the end of the day, in the early game, the most important thing to get is Sky Coins, and getting money is purely for the purpose of buying more Sky Coins before they skyrocket in price. If anything, what this is going to do is end up making that Sky Coins stay at a similar level for longer throughout the season, just because there's less money actually going to each individual player, especially those at the top of the server. But there are often people actually skipped out on making cactus farms altogether just because they made more money farming crops or actually mining, so this probably won't have too much of an impact on the server overall. The next change is a very interesting change that I'm not really sure how I feel about. Island value prices have also been revamped, giving each block a digestible number in the multiple of 5. Most block values were lowered to facilitate this, Emerald and Diamond being affected the most, losing more than 50% of their original value. The problem lies in the fact that Netherite was actually buffed. Now, I'm not sure if you know this, but there was actually a reason that numbers were not digestible on the value blocks. That's because their values were based off their prices with an average of $100 to each value. The problem is reworking these numbers not only messes with the block values, but also messes with the calculated dollar per block value ratio. This meant that if buying from the shop, Netherite would always be cheaper to get the exact same amount of block value. Likewise, selling Netherite directly to the shop yielded more than 90% less money, so players often decided to sell their Netherite blocks to compete in islands who would often buy it for a little under the buy value so that they don't spend as much money and you get as much profit as possible. As you saw earlier with Stoller, since diamonds and emeralds were only slightly worse in Netherite, they also benefited from this. Since the distance between them is now so far, competing players will now offer significantly less than they would otherwise. This heavily nerfs my late game catch-up strategy that relied on supplying top islands with value blocks, and personally I just see it as a very strange decision. Maybe this was their intention, wanting competing islands to only purchase directly from the shop, but all this really does is punish those who aren't competing and just want to mine. Regardless, I'm not sure why they decided to increase Netherite's value by so much. You could argue it's because of the 50% cut to all the economy, but in that case, why not just also buff everything else? Personally, I'd argue to either lower Netherite's value to maybe 200, or if anything, increase the value of other value blocks to compete better across the board. Next important thing is actually a rework and new items and pricing come into stuff in the XP shop. Now, I don't know if you've used the XP shop before, but basically it sucked. If you ever bought anything using XP, it would generally be a waste of money and a waste of XP overall. The hoppers were incredibly overpriced, souls were terribly not worth it, the dragon fragments were better off just farming D-boss, and vote keys were not terrible, if anything was the only thing worth buying, but still was actually cheaper to buy anywhere else. It was a good concept, but unfortunately just wasn't properly balanced to actually be made use of. So hopefully this will actually make it better. The soul shop is also another thing being changed, adding new items as well as revamping their costs. Now the soul shop was also incredibly expensive, having cost like 75,000 for a single servant key. The only things really worth buying in it were stuff like the infinite water and lava bucket, which was worth I believe around 1,000 souls, which was pretty much very useful to anyone who ever wanted to use it. Obviously there were also certain tags that were pretty useful, but overall it just was something that wasn't frequently used, and I'm happy that they're trying to revamp it a little bit. Another interesting change is that exposed copper is now sellable, which is interesting given that the oxidization of copper blocks were actually disabled in a previous patch, but maybe this means they're actually going to re-enable it, but now allow you to sell the exposed copper that was oxidized. The 1.5 times sell booster you get on main drops is actually being moved to tier 6, meaning either that the 50% double vex drop is being moved to tier 9, or everything is being slid down, making the 1.5 increase on the amount of sky coins gained move to tier 9. Now this is a very impactful change, because basically it was at a state where it wasn't always worth getting to tier 9, specifically because getting a 1.5 cell boost on kelp just wasn't really worth the money. Now with this being moved to tier 6, it becomes a situation where if you want to get as many sky coins, or alternatively if you want to double the amount of vex drops that are produced, you are going to want to get all the way to tier 9, both stuff that you generally are going to want. So a very good change for the sake of balancing things, but pretty much just means that you're going to have to spend more time on your own island, grinding up your Vex Master before you move to other islands. If you want more info on what I mean by that, you can check out my Vex grinding guide that I actually made previously that explains the whole situation of why you want to farm on other people's islands rather than your own. The next change is pretty interesting, actually, but kind of bounces back to what we were talking about before with the soul shop, and it's actually the ability to withdraw souls. Now before, the only way to get souls was to physically kill mobs, and there was no way to trade or withdraw them in any way whatsoever. Now with the ability to withdraw souls, this basically means that you're basically adding a whole new currency to the entire server. Now with the whole revamp happening to the soul shop, it's pretty impossible for us to predict how expensive a soul is going to be, but basically give it about a week or two and it will round out to a certain amount. Ore blocks will be added to the mastery sell boost, basically saying that when you sell a block rather than the actual ingot, you'll still benefit from having your mastery boosts. But this is interesting because as you see, this seems to already be the case with me getting the same amount of money for selling a block with the same amount of ingot value. So maybe this was another change that was made mid-season that's actually now being pushed onto the patch notes so that we are aware that it is a thing. Next, a new change is added, making island universal cell boosters actually untradeable. Now this is an interesting change because basically what a lot of top islands would do is they would actually buy these cell charges for, as you see, something like 2.5 million, and then they would use it in order to sell stuff like Vex and Cactus for significantly more than they would otherwise. Now the problem with this was that these cell boosters were actually usually bought from newer players who actually couldn't make use of the cell boosters anyway. So while they were selling the cell boosters for around 2.5 million and actually making profit, these top players were actually using these cell boosters and making billions of dollars. Now in theory you could say this is a win-win for both the old players and the new players, but the problem is that the older players were actually gaining so much of a win compared to the newer players that it often didn't feel very balanced. So therefore I am happy that they're deciding that they want to remove it. The next change is that MSMO is actually becoming harder to level, meaning pretty much that it will take you a lot longer to get to mining level 1000 so you can get 22 seconds on your super breaker, or herbalism level 1000 so that you automatically replant every plant you break. Basically, it's another thing aiding to lengthen the early game of the server so that we spend a bit more time before we get into the point where money isn't worth as much and everyone's just fiending for sky coins. Overall, I think it's a good change, but I am starting to get a bit concerned that we're making the early game progression a bit too slow, and therefore this will cause adverse effects on solos or smaller islands. Naturally, the overall server's progression is usually based off the top 1% of the server that kind of control the economy of the entire server overall. But if the progression becomes too slow to the point where newer and smaller islands don't feel like they're actually progressing, I fear that they'll actually lose interest in the server, and when it comes to the point where these older islands are lasting for 2-3 months, they'll feel like there's physically no way they can catch up. This is made even worse now that they've nerfed how the value blocks function, and it's just my overall concern. Regardless, I do feel like there's a lot of different fun things to do on the server, even outside of grind for IS top or making as much money as possible, such as the brand new leaderboard that's being added, as well as Dragon Boss. So overall, we'll see how it works out. Infused skulls are now going to produce 2 times as much H tokens, basically meaning that if you get an infused blaze skull, you can actually convert them into H tokens and get 6 H tokens instead of the standard 3. Now I'm okay with this overall, but my problem is they're actually now deciding to remove mob armor. Now I'm really sad about this because I really liked mob armor, and I feel like they were really cool and close to becoming something that was consistently used. See, they've already made so many changes, such as making them more durable, as well as making it so you can actually put custom enchants on them, but I guess they decided it wasn't really worth the time and just decided to remove them altogether. Once again, I'm really sad about this, and I don't think that should have been the case, but hey, it's their decision, it's neither here nor there. Now, next really big important change is actually now going to be the ability to sell and trade minions. Now, before they were made untradeable, and no one really knew why, but now that is coming back. Now basically meaning that if you have a bunch of cactus minions and you've maxed your cactus mastery, you're now able to put them back on the H so that other players can buy them without having to grind up their own cactus minions individually. This is really helpful because it basically makes it so you no longer have to have a giant PV filled with cactus minions in case you decide to change islands, or just throw them off into the void because you literally don't want them anymore. Now, next thing is actually something we're going to put all together, and that actually is the buff to vote parties, lucky blocks, and boss pouches. Now, it says they now have improved rewards, but we have no real way to know how improved these rewards are, but basically just know that if you're doing vote parties, if you're doing lucky blocks, or if you're getting boss pouches from D-Boss, you're generally going to get more things than you got prior. Next thing is going to be the addition of a new thing in the island bank being XP. Yes, you are now able to deposit XP into your island bank, basically allowing you to trade in between players without much big concern. Now, I don't really think this is going to be used too frequently because it's a lot easier to just send someone your XP through an XP bottle, but my one thought is maybe they're making it so that the XP farm that produces XP is actually now putting this XP in the bank. Now, if this is the case, that would be a massive nerf to giant 10-man islands who make the XP farm, because now rather than getting XP per individual person, all that XP is going to go into the XP bank, meaning you won't actually get as much XP per person. Now, unless this is buffed externally, making it so that each person increase the amount of XP that the XP farm produces, this basically means that it is going to be significantly worse than it was prior. Now, this wasn't in the patch notes, so we don't know if that actually is the case, and it may just be an extra bank just to store your XP. Regardless, I am actually kind of excited about this. What I'd like for them to do with this actually is make it so that each and every currency is actually be able to put into the XP bank, whether that be souls, head tokens, or everything of the sort. What they could then do is make it so you actually have to use these individual currencies to do island upgrades. I think this would be a really fun system, because basically it'd make it so, oh, if you want to increase your island generator, you have to use sky coins. Oh, but if you want to increase your infused skull rate, then you have to use H tokens. Oh, you want to increase your mob multiplier? Oh, now you have to use XP. I think it'd be really cool and basically make it so you're kind of fine-tuning where each of these currencies go in the system, and make it so there is kind of a exchange system going on in the server where like, oh, we need money to increase this upgrade. Oh, we need sky coins to increase this upgrade. I'll trade you sky coins for money for this amount. I think it'd be really cool, and just a little slight thing I think would slip in there. But hey, regardless, speaking of upgrades, they're actually going to be increasing the sky coin requirement for upgrades. So basically, if it costs 1.5 million sky coins, it's probably going to cost something like 2 million or 3 million. Basically another attempt to lengthen the early game of the server. Still another concern I have for those solos and smaller islands, but still something that is happening. Next, the final thing we're going to have is actually making it so the shadow summoners actually have buffed drops, making so they're actually going to give more XP and more sky coins compared to how much they gave prior. Now, I doubt it'll ever be to the point where they're actually going to be given more XP or more sky coins in any other method, but definitely is going to be significantly better than it was prior. The main important thing I hope this happens is making it so that you no longer have that pop-up that says you get 4.079 sky coins, and instead will at least show us that we get an integer amount of sky coins. Regardless, a cool fun change. Overall though, that's going to be all the significant changes that are going to be happening in Season 4. Quite a lot of changes happening, most of them quality of life changes, but a lot of huge changes coming in with fishing and the new solo leaderboards. Now, obviously, this video was supposed to be meant as an overall overview, and I'm really sad that it goes this long, but what I'm going to be doing is making a dedicated video for fishing and the solo leaderboards, so you guys can have more in-depth information on that for when the new season drops. For that reason, I must say thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'm super excited to be continuing to make videos. So excited for Season 4, can't wait for it to go out, and I can't wait to see you guys all in the Island Top 10. Regardless, I'll see you guys all in the next video. Laters! Trying to get it done. Lost faith for a minute there. Working hard in the hot sun. I'm trying to keep that to myself.